Hey, welcome to the Join the Journey podcast. I'm Aaron Chase. I'm the host of the podcast. Real quick before we start the episode, I just made an Instagram specifically for the podcast. So it's JTJ Pod on Instagram. And I want to start growing the podcast. I want more views. I want more people to watch and enjoy it and get to know all of these Chicago comedians. So if you could follow the Instagram and share all of these clips and these pictures and these videos as much as possible, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, let's start the episode.
Yeah, just it's cool to be the best part about comedy, and I think I said this on the first time I was on, is being able to give people opportunities. I think that's how 80% of this business works, right? Like referrals, vouchers, things like that, like all the behind the scenes stuff. And now that I'm headlining more regularly, I can bring people with me. Not all the time, but sometimes the club's like, hey, you can bring a feature, you can bring whatever. And sometimes if I do like a private gig or whatever, I bring the whole show, right? It's like I bring a host. Sometimes it's just me and a feature or whatever. But it's nice to be able to be like, hey, this show is in this place. I know a comic who lives there locally who'd be great. So I just have a network of people. And then I also have people in Chicago that I'm like trying to level up. Like I want you deserve to do 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're getting that here. So come with me and do it. And if you do well, I'll bring you again. So it's like I have this like going with like 15, 20 people. And I also, though, certain markets where I'm breaking into them for the first time, I'm not certain how the show is going to be. Like I bring people who I know are just going to kill. Mm-hmm. Like I bring headliners then, who also selfishly are also trying to get into the club. So it all comes back around, but I want the strongest show possible.
Yeah.
And there are certain shows where I'll take a little bit more of like a leeway where I'm like, this one, it's not as high profile, high visibility, but at the same time for the person opening, I mean, as you know, we take everything. So I still open. I don't care. I do every spot. Host, feature, headline, like I'll do guest spots still, like if I need to, I'd rather do that than do an open mic. So people get weird about that. I'm like, yeah, if I can pop into a club and go up for 5 minutes, that's better to me than waiting around for a mic,
Yeah.
And people have an ego about that. I'm like, guest spots are they can be multifunctional. It can be either to like showcase yourself for the club, but an old school guest spot, I just heard Ali Sadiq talking about this. Guest spot used to be a special guest. That's why it's called a guest.
Yeah.
It was not an open micer trying to get an audition for a club. It could be like, hey, I know this headliner coming in who's my friend. We're going to have him secretly pop on the show. Like, I just heard like Sam Morril was at JFL, and at his show, Mark Norman popped in on his show. Like that is technically a guest spot. But it's obviously a much higher profile thing. So I think there can be two ways to look at it, right? So I like to do both, where it's like it's kind of fun to come in on someone else's show and just do like 5 or 10 or whatever. And it's obviously better than a mic because you're able to like really get into some stuff. And you already have a little bit of like, oh, guest spot. It's funny that the guest spot gets like more respect than a host.
Yeah.
When people don't know, like, because you always bring up, oh, we got a special guest. It could be like the worst comedian on the show, but but they don't know that. The audience doesn't know how we look at things, right? So it's very funny. Like you can kind of meander your way into some shit, But I use it's all about like efficiency and when I can get in, what I need to do. If I need to run 10 minutes, I'm going to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. It's always a pleasure talking to you, dude. When because you immediately, dude. I'm so glad I got you you're the first comic on the cushy chair.
It makes sense. I wouldn't come if it wasn't a fucking cushy chair. What are you gonna put me on your bed over here? I'm not doing that.
You just have a crispness about you.
Oh, thanks, man.
So you start.
You mean I'm a lunatic? Is what?
But okay. So the opportunity stuff. What is it about like? What is it about the ability to present opportunities that makes you feel good, and why at this point do you feel the word obligated doesn't feel like the right word, but that's the word I'm going to use right now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean, I think it's weird because comedy is so much of what we do is, you go to a show, you do well at the show, someone sees you at that show, they book you on their show. Especially when you're starting out, like going to mics, half of going to mics is just showing face. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously you're not going to do well at every one, but people seeing you around makes people think that you're working and you care about this. There was like when you started comedy, like 6 months of you just showing up at mics, like no one's gonna really pay attention to you until they've seen you enough. And there's still kind of that mentality of like, well, you got to put the time in before people are gonna give you any time of day, right? So there is this obligation of like, you feel an obligation to the scene that you're part of, and also whenever you visit other cities and you're from Chicago or something, like I want to bring Chicago with me in a way. I want to be like, hey, I think our comics, we have the best comics in the country, and I'll bring people and show you that. And so that's why we have this kind of, I think, cred across the country of like, oh, these are Chicago comics, Like, I will put open micers in Chicago up against features in like Iowa or something,
Yeah.
And I'm going to Iowa next week, so I apologize. But but like it just is just because we have a great scene. We have people have many clubs. We have independent shows. We have tons of mics. We have people running their own stuff constantly. We have like the Lodge. We have great spaces that let people develop and no fear of like industry, which is kind of great, but also kind of sucks, right? But now it's getting a little more transparent. I think people are branching out. But like, yeah, you just feel like, hey, the people did this for me. Like, people saw something in me and were like, come do this. And I think it's what you should do. That's what you should do in this position of the scene. And it's not even an obligation. It's just like I want to foster goodwill too. Like I want other people to see what I'm doing and do that too, because it helps the scene grow, So it's not even about me. It's about the broader kind of community, right? And also selfishly, it's like it's all for shows, right? We all do everything for shows. Like when I was new, I didn't have any. No one's booking me. I was like 2 months in, so I produced my own shows, and then I booked who I wanted. And then because I was producing a show, people were like, oh, well, you should come do my show. And then you know how it works. It's like, so you eventually get to a point where then you're good enough. People are just going to book you because you're funny. But when you start, you're like, it's a lot of like, well, how do I prove my value? I'm not this funny yet, but I can come and do 5. But I also run a great room, and I'm putting up people. I'm paying them. So it's like monetary. It's opportunity based. It's everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
so multifaceted.
The camera can't see it. I got a big old smile on my
face.
You said that when you were coming up, I know that you Tyler, and there was that one
Meg.
You, Tyler and Meg. I know you guys kind of started, I don't want to say unorthodox, but not through with the mics, but you guys kind of built your own thing.
Yeah, Earl probably too soon, but like in a way kind of shielded us from some of the drama and some of the kind of hurt of starting comedy, by yourself. Like, it's funny because like you realize like when you started, you probably have 3 or 4 people that you kind of immediately became fast friends with and probably still work with, produced with to this day. And we had that from our improv class where we all met. And then we just carried that over into stand-up. And then we had even more people that were not stand-ups but still like in that sphere because they're fellow improvisers that would come watch us at open mics. So that just made the whole experience better because it felt more like, oh, it's not just like me at a mic, it's me and my friends, and it's like it's a little bit. Then we go right after together and we do notes, and so we kind of carried some of those principles that otherwise, if you're just by yourself doing comedy, doing mics alone for like 6 months, like so that's why so many people quit. That's why so many people burn out because it's such a solo thing, and you're just waiting, and it's like it's kind of miserable. So if you have a community and you have some people around you that are also working on this goal with you, it doesn't feel as bad.
Yeah, I finally feel that now. I don't know when we did the first episode. Was it my first year here?
I think you were you were just kind of getting into things here. Yeah.
Life is much better.
Yeah, well now you have a show. You have a team. You have people with you. Yeah.
That feeling.
And that's what I told you to do. I was like, go do that. It's going to be much better. And you're also, now you have a weekly great show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for doing it.
Yeah, it was wild when I did it. It was very fun, though. It was very fun.
It's been interesting. Like, okay, so now that I'm in the space I'm in, I'm connecting a little more with what you're saying. And one of the things I learned finally was to not take it so personally if I don't get booked.
Yeah.
Like,
you can't.
This show that we're setting up now, and there's a few people hitting me up, and I've had some weirdness about it. Do you know what I mean? Like
you have, like, you're like, oh, now you're hitting me up.
Yeah. There's people, and I felt a little bit of
getting
that.
Some new followers, huh? You're like, oh man, okay, interesting. Yeah.
And it's weird. It's super weird, at least so far.
Sure.
And I'm curious how you've navigated the weirdness.
Well, first of all, I don't know if you do this. I haven't seen it, but we never promoted our shows in the comedy community pages. We want audience to come to the shows. We don't want comedians to come to the shows. I mean, I hate shows where they're like, oh, come watch the show and then you can submit. That's stupid. The show was for the public. And if you're a producer, your responsibility is to fill the room. It's not the comedian's responsibility, especially not until you're headlining and it's a real like show where you're the draw. If it's a showcase and you expect these people who've been doing comedy for 6 months to bring people. That's a bringer show. Label it as such and move to New York, because we don't do that in Chicago, right? So I hate that kind of bullshit of like, oh man, like, no, you're a bad producer and you just are running a bar show and you're paying people $6 out of a tip jar. Like, the audacity to be like, I got to bring 6 of my friends. It's like, no. So we saw that early on, and we're like, we're just gonna focus on making a really good show, and we'll book the talent that we think is funny. But again, when you bring 20 of your friends, and it's like, you're gonna have a decent set, even if you're not that good, because you're kind of supplying the audience. And this is initially how it works, right? You kind of have to build your own thing. But then the shows themselves get a good reputation. Then you start getting new people. Then you start getting marketing. Then you start doing all these other things. So that's how we kind of started. And to avoid the weirdness, we didn't market the show to comedians. I mean, we were anti that. We just, like we told people we're running it. It's very public, right? We're taking professionally, photos. And if you did like 2 clicks on Google or our website, you could see what we're doing. But we knew early on, we're like, we don't want the show to be filled with people just trying to get on the show. So obviously we love when people come and support, but with a genuine intent, not just to be like, oh, now I was here. You remember saw me last week? Like, let me get on, which is a lot of people do that. Like, I had one girl come. She doesn't do stand-up anymore. She came up to me after the show. She watched the show, and she goes, hey, that was really cool. How do I submit? I was like, oh, we have a form on our website. You can go ahead and submit. She goes, well, I have it set, but it's just me in front of my mirror doing jokes. Can I just submit that? I was like, no. I was like, no, you can't. So people don't know. I'm like, you got to figure this out. You should know not to say that to me.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. And she was like, I thought she was joking. I started laughing. I was like, oh, that's like really funny. Like, where's your? Just send me like
good
a clip.
Bit.
Yeah, go. She goes, no, that's all I have. And I was like, well, then you probably shouldn't be submitting yet. Like, you're not ready to be submitting. If you have your only performance is you in front of your mirror, you shouldn't be doing shows right now. Yeah. You should be doing mics. And there's no shame in that. Like, I still do mics. Like, I'm going to do a mic after this, and then I go and do a show. Like, I don't care. I do whatever you want, but don't try to get something because you think you are owed it just by coming, right? So, and to avoid the weirdness, I was very like transparent early on too. I was like, look, it's 1 show a month. At the time, it was like monthly or whatever. I'm like, all the producers do spots, so we book 1 spot, and it was a headliner. We'd always book like someone who was an actual headliner in the scene at the time. So it really was just like our show, then plus this person to kind of cap it out. And that's how we ran it. And we had an improv. It was a variety show. So we had like an improv group, which is our group. So it really was about us. And then people kind of started seeing that. They're like, oh, they're not booking anybody. They're booking the 4 people who headline everything anyway. So it was kind of like understood in a way. And then we started getting other shows where we would book people. Like, we have Comedy Clubhouse now, right? Yeah. We book everybody on that as long as you can do 10 minutes. And it's a late night kind of rowdier show. And
it's fun to host.
It's fun to host, but it is also not always an easy show. Yeah. I mean, it can be a drunk show, so we're actually starting to tighten that up a little bit. But the point is, we can give people like a guest spot on that show. Like, there's ways to kind of put people into places to succeed. And I will give everyone a chance. I'll ask someone how they did or whatever. I'll do a little research too, but it's very rare that I'm going to flat out not have anything for somebody, at this point. There's enough opportunities, I think,
There's
around.
plenty of opportunities.
Or I'll direct them to somebody like, I'm like, oh, he runs a great show. That would be a good fit for you or whatever.
You were saying picking up on people being genuine. How do you suss that out? Because this can be a slimy situation.
Sure.
Or a space. How do you figure out who's genuine?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard because you have to play this constant. I mean, I do it too. Like, you meet someone who's like from somewhere else, and you got to be like, oh, like, you kind of want to let them know who you are without like being a douche about it. But you're like, I think it comes across, and that's what I realized the longer I've been doing this. Like, when my first year, I got a couple big credits. Like, I got to open for Roy Wood Jr. and Michelle Wolf in like the first year. So this was like huge to me, and I was like holding on to that because I mean, naturally, like a year in, it's crazy. And so I would kind of like, anytime I'd meet somebody, I'd somehow work that into the conversation. But I'm talking about like bar shows. Like, I don't need to be doing this. And also, people know, like, people are paying attention. Like, we all know kind of roughly what each other are doing, and especially in the local scene at that point, I was really focused on doing local shows. I wasn't on the road really. I was so new, so it's almost more apparent. And then if you're on the road, there's already a level of like, oh, this person's got to be here already to even be at this position. So every level you go up, you already assume a level of like competency, right? So I kind of realized that as I started doing this, and I kind of stopped, doing the thing. And now I do enough shows here and outside that like and I've headlined enough rooms where like now my picture is up in places that I don't even it's kind of cool because then I go somewhere, they're like, oh yeah, we've been like we've seen you or we watched your stuff, and so it's finally in a position where now they know me before I have to like do that. But you just have to be patient and wait for that to happen, because it's like if you throw it in someone's face, then you kind of come across ungenuine. But sometimes it's okay to also like, if it's something that someone truly has no idea and you're like, well, I should be here or whatever, like you can kind of say a few things, but there's a way to go about it where you're not doing it to be like a douche,
Right. It's a balance.
It's a balance, and I think people kind of understand that. People get the scene kind of checks you too. I mean, there's comics, I'm not going to say who they are, but they're like maybe new or they started during the pandemic. They started running shows, and then they kind of like quickly realize like that only got you so far. If you're gonna then be like, well, I booked you on this, and now I'm trying to apply to this, it's like these are not the same thing at all. And then the clubs themselves that they were running those at kind of got fed up and were like, well, we're not, like, you're still 2 years in, like this is not how this works. Like, you were great to run a show, we appreciate it, but like you got to also understand there's a leveling up system that happens here. So the scene kind of naturally churns those people out, and everyone knows who those people are. Like, we all know. We have like Facebook groups about this. Like we know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's very obvious to see. So I think everything comes out on its own time, and I think, obviously you might get screwed in one or two situations, but like you're going to know.
Yeah. It's the I get what you mean. Like, a comedy weeds out the weak.
Yeah, 100%. And fake, I think it does. I mean, you can't. It's very difficult to go through this in the normal way, and I mean this because there's people now blowing up on like other avenues, right? But TikTok, things like that. If you are a stand-up and you come through mics, clubs, festivals, you can't be fake. Like, it's almost impossible, because so much of this is like based on relationships. So much of this is based on, people like working with you, and it's not, even though it is very solo, you can't do everything yourself, right?
Yeah, and comics are savvy. They can pick up on that.
They can pick up. That's our whole job, is like to read shit, So
I'm just double checking.
Yeah, no worries.
Audio. Being a one-man production team is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and we all are with like social media, with clips, and it's like finally building a team, but it takes a while to get that spot,
I'm with you. You've been hitting the road a lot. Right? Like, you don't ever fucking stop. I'm tired listening to you. But you hit the road, and you were saying we got some cred out here in Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago. I mean, that's why I love. I was gonna move during the pandemic, right before, and I was about to move to New York, and I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. And then the pandemic hit, and I started just like headlining from here, and I was like, wait, this is what I want to do. I want to headline. I want to be on the road on the weekends, and I want to do local stuff during the week. And I was like, I'm doing that here. If I go to New York, I could potentially do that, but then I'm starting over in a way on the local scene, and I'm also starting over from all the private and corporate gigs I do. I've done so many of those over the years that those are what pay the rent. That's the money maker gigs. Obviously, when you start headlining more, you get more money, but it's not nowhere near what a corporate or a private gig makes. And so I'm like, if I lose that, then I would have to get a job again. Like, I'm full time. So I'm like, this is what we wanted. Like, I talk about with Tyler, and I talk about this all the time. It's like, we are both full time stand-ups, and we're like, we did it. We did the thing. So now to move to New York is, I still think about it. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to make trips out there. Just because I feel like obviously there's industry, there's other advantages to being in a city like New York. Also more reps, better comics. Like, you're around super seasoned comedians, right? So there is all these advantages, but I think what I'm trying to do is be kind of everywhere, right? And I realized, I think pandemic made a lot of people realize that you don't need to be based in LA or New York anymore. I mean, there's so many headliners that move to like Montana, and they just do the road, and then they just their cost of living is super low, and it's very smart. Once you build your fan base, you can be based anywhere, and that's what I'm kind of trying to do.
Doing the road, doing all that. Yeah, the especially with the internet and building that fan base, going all over the place. I mean, it makes sense. I think what I mean, I've said this before. I said this last podcast too. Your business acumen is fucking.
Sorry, I'm listening to you.
No, you're good. You're good. Your business acumen is through the goddamn roof, and so I think I definitely trust your judgment on staying here. I'm sure it makes perfect sense.
I mean, again, it's if you want to go to, you can definitely, there's people who have moved and I think who are very funny and great, and I think they're doing the thing, but it's like I already reached a level here where I'm like, now I'm too egotistical to leave. And not even egotistical, but it's also like I don't want to restart. Like, I can't go from headlining to not. I just can't do it now. It's too late. So I kind of feel part of me is mad about that. Like, part of me is like, I should have moved earlier. You know, but then you never know because you're like, well, the pandemic happened. No one could predict that. You know.
Do you feel like you'll eventually just reach a place where you can go to New York and you're good anyway?
Yeah, and that's like I went in April and I felt pretty good. Like I did some great shows. I did a couple clubs. Like it already was better than I expected it to be. So I'm like, I could just keep doing that and then eventually get to a place. Because the nice thing about New York, and as I'm finding, if you get past at like one of the major clubs, like one or two of them, there's comics who only work like the Cellar, or comics who only work Newark Comedy Club. And maybe those two together, the Stand. And you do like, there's so many shows and spots that it almost is, unlike here where like I work all the clubs here and I get enough spots, but I have to work all the clubs. I can't just be like only at one, because unless you work every day, you're not going to. But there, you can literally do like 15, 20 shows at one club during a week. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because like the Cellar has shows from like 5 p.m. to like midnight.
Jeez.
And so you get like 10 spots in like a weekend. And that's like, so to think about that, I'm like, oh, so I really just need to get in at one or two clubs and then I can justify kind of being here, you know? So that's kind of what I'm trying to do is maybe get in at one or two and then maybe decide if I want to move or just go visit every few months and do what I'm doing, you know?
Yeah, I know cost of living is a little better out here, right?
Oh, of course. And like I just bought a place here. Like I've put roots down here, and
Yeah.
the reason I bought the place is then I can rent it out and potentially like sublet, and you know I'm like trying to think of all the ways to do it, right? But we'll see. Because now
like,
it's a lot.
Dude, it's like talking to a guy from Wolf of Wall Street without the coke. Like you just go, man. So I had something that you said that connected with me a little bit on a personal level was you and Tyler being full time. Is Meg was her name?
Yeah, she's also, I think she's doing some freelance stuff now, but she's also like writing and doing a bunch of other stuff. Yeah.
So I'm not full time yet, but I had a moment this past month which was eye opening, and I'm gonna express what happened. And I want to get your perspective on it. I paid my rent with comedy for the first time in my life.
It's awesome, dude.
Thank
Congrats.
you. And it felt it didn't feel like how I thought it would. I'll elaborate on that. So I was struggling with money, and I actually literally today, maybe about 2 hours ago, I just secured a job, and I've been unemployed throughout all of summer. So I'm in a very good mood.
Great.
And it was like that money that went to that rent was like money I needed. This wasn't icing on the cake. This was like,
this is for rent, but I have no money now.
I have no money now.
Okay. That's why it wasn't as sweet as
True. It was weird because on one end I was like, holy fuck, I'm doing it.
Yes.
On the other hand, I'm like, God damn it, I'm sweating and I'm tired and I got to do this again next
It's still
month.
like paycheck to paycheck in a way. Yeah.
I'm curious when it clicked like, oh, I'm doing this full time. How did it feel for you for this?
Yeah. That's a good point for people who like think about that, because it's not just paying your rent. There's other expenses, right?
Yeah.
You got to look at your credit card bill. You got to look at like that's what you need to look at. It's rent plus like I pay for parking. Like you got all these other monthly expenses that you pay for. And rent is just one element of that. So you have to look at your monthly budget and be like, can I cover this on comedy? So being from like a business finance background, I knew this, but I was like, I'm just going to, especially during the pandemic, I was like, I'm doing like way less shows and comedy in general. I can totally afford to pick up. So I was working a virtual job part-time, full-time when the pandemic hit because no comedy was happening. Then they were nice enough to let me transition to part-time. So I had this sweet setup where I was working from home Monday through Wednesday, and then off Thursday, Friday. And for comedy, as you know, like that's when I'm traveling, that's when I'm touring. So it kind of was the best of both. I'm getting a weekly paycheck. I'm not doing really shit at all. So I was like, why would I not do this? This is great. Yeah. And then they realized that after like a certain point, they're like, oh man, this guy works like 6 hours a week. We're paying him way too much money. And like it was great because like it was very cool. My boss liked me. I was good at my job at the point. Like I had basically taken a step down. Like I was a director of like human resources, recruiting, talent, and I basically went to being just an individual recruiter and like employee engagement person, project person. So I went backwards, but I knew it would be easy, and I knew I could do it in half the time and half the effort, which so I want to. I'm like, that's what you have to do. It's trade-offs, right? I'm putting 100% in comedy. I cannot put 100% into my job. So I was very clear about that with them too. I was like, look, I'm going to do this, but like, I'm not trying to do this. Like eventually I want to get to a point where I don't need to do this.
Did they know? So they knew you were a comic?
Yeah, of course. Like they were super supportive. They're great, and it got I was on a contract gig. So once the contract came up for renewal, they're like, and comedy had basically opened up at this point again. This was a couple of years ago. They're like, all right, like, unless you come full time now that shit's like back, like COVID's kind of, we're back in the office, like, and I was like, I don't want to go, like, that, I'm not doing any of that. So then I just was like, I just got to do this, and I just went full time, and kind of at that point I was getting enough like headlining work and other things that I was like, let's just try it. I can always get another job, you know. I have enough experience and I have enough connections. I think I can get another job. So far I just been like, I don't know when I feel like I'm out of that experimentation phase, but I feel like I am now, you know.
You seem confident in it.
Yeah, I mean that's 90% of comedy, right? Is like I'll say something confidently. It doesn't mean I feel it internally, but like, yeah, I mean it's just like now the idea of being in an, like it's so foreign to me. I'm like I cannot sit in an office and care about any of this, you know. And comedy is like I it's so consuming now. It's like every day I'm sending emails, I'm booking shit, clips. Like I'm just so in it now that I'm like I don't want to have another thing.
I believe it, and it seems like you've earned it, which you're clearly very aware of. That you've put the work
I
in.
feel like I still feel guilty about.
Really?
I have a weird guilt thing because I see like the other day I was walking around downtown where I used to work, and it was like 11, and I was going to the gym, and I just see all these people in like suits going to work, and I was like, oh, that was like me like a year. Like I was, and I felt a little guilty because I'm like, this is their lunch break. Yeah. Like I just woke up like a little bit ago. I had like a nice morning. I came here. I haven't like, I was checking my email, my phone, but I wasn't like at a desk working. So you feel a little bit weird when you're like, the 9 to 5 element is still like, that's what we're so trained in as people. We're like, oh, I got to go to work. I got to make money. But really what we do is continuous, you know? People think comedy, oh, you're on stage for an hour a night or whatever, like 30 minutes. It's like, first of all, I'm driving, I'm traveling, the wear and tear of that, plus I'm constantly doing admin stuff. I'm constantly checking my email. I'm sending notes. I'm creating group chats for shows. I'm managing all this shit. So there are this, and I'm never off. Like someone can message me at like 2 a.m. and I'll respond if it's about a show. Yeah. Like I'm always on, you know? So it is a little bit of like, you have to understand is a gig work kind of stuff versus a stable 9 to 5 job. And I struggle with that because I was in that corporate thing for so long, but I've also been to a point where I'm like, no, that's pretty cool. Like I make money of telling jokes. Like I need to be cool, happy with that. Yeah. You know? And I don't like, it's still way better. I would still rather be the guy going to the gym at 11 than like, you know, doing this bullshit and going back to the office. Like, yeah, fuck that. I'm not doing that again. Yeah.
Yeah. You can never go back.
No, I can't. Unless I get like, it would have to be a part-time kind of situation where it's like consulting or something, and then only then it would have to be pretty aligned with what I'm doing in comedy. Like I've done some like brand stuff or like email punch-up where it's still comedic based. I still want a job in comedy, but like now with the writer's strike and all these other things happening, I'm just like, I've always been stand-up. I'm like, I'm just gonna keep doing this because it seems to be working, you know. But the dream is to have a day job. I think we talked about that last time in comedy of some sort.
Your grind and your business focus is something I don't think a lot of people take into consideration, especially new comics. Like I know we were talking earlier before we started recording that this is essentially comics watching other comics in the scene.
Yeah.
The newer ones, if you could express like what this is on a business level, because I think there's a lot of misconception that like, and on my part as well, when I first started doing this, that like, oh, I'm gonna become a comic and laze around all day and fuck off and I'll write a joke, and it's like, I mean, based off of the way you work at this, that's not the case.
No, I mean it can be. That's the kind of thing about comedy though. There are a lot of people who are happy. Like when I started doing it and started making money, I didn't know for the first like year or so. I'm like, I didn't know this was going to be my full-time thing. I just knew I really liked it, and I'm treating it like a job. I didn't know it was going to be my sole source of income and all that. Then I just it was fun. It was that I was still working, so we'd have like our monthly show, and we had maybe 1 or 2 other real shows that month, and then we had mics, and so then it's a party because then you're like, I got my mic on. I got this mic on Monday. We all get fucked up. We have our show. All of our friends come. We all get fucked up. It's like it's a fun time. But now it's like, shit, I got like 10 shows this week. I got to write custom jokes for these 2 shows. This is a roast. This is a private thing. I got to go clean on this one. I got to go dirty on this one. Like it's a business. You're like, oh shit, I have to treat each of these shows with different things. Like, and so now it becomes me. I'm still having fun because it's ultimately still telling jokes and it's still great. But there is an element of like, but this is my livelihood now. It's different. It means more. So
do you miss the pre-livelihood at all?
I mean, a little bit. I think it's all phases, right? Like,
Yeah.
obviously, right now I'm in a better position than I was then. But then it was just more carefree because you could be like, I can just kind of fuck around and do whatever. Because it's like I don't have something that's super stressful or a big show until 2 weeks from now. So in the next 2 weeks, it's up to me to be like, how many sets do I want to do? Do I want to do 5 mics this week? Do I want to do 1? It really is kind of, that's what's cool about comedy. You can kind of schedule it how you want, at least starting off. And then you get to a point where you're like, oh shit, now I have obligations. I have tickets I have to sell for shows I'm the headliner for, or I have an event I have to prepare for something, you know? So then it becomes like obligations versus like, this is just for fun. So you have to find a balance. I mean, I think I overload it, you know, a little bit, but I'm getting a little better. Trying to say no to some shit, and I'm also trying to schedule time for myself.
I wrote that down, man, because it's funny. So when we first spoke in the podcast, I think that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
When we did that, there was a different energy about me and about you.
Yeah. That was, like I said, just kind of emerging from the pandemic and stuff. Yeah.
And now, and your energy now is like, it's turned up, man.
Yeah, it's
and
wild, dude. It's
and not in a bad way. I'm always, and I'm forever impressed by what you do. Where do you find rest? How do you find rest? Do you find rest?
Yeah, I mean, you really have to schedule it
Yeah.
at this point because it is. I've kind of found my limits through doing this long. Like, I know when I need to stop. Like, I'm in touch with my like mental state, physical state enough. Like, I do a lot to keep myself at the peak of both those things. Like, work out every day, like rarely miss that. Meditate every day. Like, I try to, get enough sleep. I try to eat right. Like, I do so many self-care things. And even with all that, you still are like, fuck, today just is not it. Like, I just wake up and I just feel weird or feel off. And then I know, like, I look at my week and I'm like, do I need to do stand-up today? What else do I have coming up? Am I trying to do something? Is it going to be valuable for me to do this, or is it going to be worse for my mental health to do this? And sometimes you have to take the L. You need to be like, no. And, like, sometimes, though, I know it's weird because, like, you also sometimes you have to do those things to push through it. So it's finding that kind of balance of, like, do I need to do this, or is it just me kind of being a little, like, pouty right now? Once I get out, I'll be fine. How many times have you been like, I don't want to do this, and then you get there and you're fine?
Literally yesterday.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And that's why the analogy to the gym is such a good one for comedy. It's like, how many times you wake up, you're like, I don't want to go work out, and then you go work out, you feel great the rest of the day, right? It's like same thing with stand-up, especially starting off. You're like, I don't want to go to this open mic. You go to the open mic, your new tag works, and you're like, that was worth it. I tangibly moved myself ahead, and I think that's why I'm like so hyper aware of it. And it's also like okay now to be like, I'm not going to run around an hour for 3 minutes when I know I'm doing 45 minutes on Friday and I can sneak in that too. Like, it's all about kind of trying to see what I need to do,
How has it been with your relationships in comedy? Because I know you're even busier now, so where do you find time for people in your life?
Yeah, and it's hard. I think I've gotten better about that too, where I'm like my friends who are outside of comedy who I know from college, like we try to see each other like once a month. Like, that's just like an understand. So there's like a mental clock that's kind of always running of like, we're going to have a night and maybe I'll have an early show or something. And then I'll be like, hey, I'm free at 8. Like, it's not crazy. Cause otherwise they're like, oh, you're free at 10:30, like on a Tuesday, like all of our times are so wild. Yeah. So try to do that. Try to schedule that stuff in, like, and relationship wise, it's like, be upfront about your times, like, the relationship I was in before when I started comedy, that was someone who kind of leveled up with me because, like, saw me as an open micer, kind of was with me through the rise. So we learned together how to do that. And now the person I'm with now, I'm like, they know. They're like, I'm like, here's what it is. This is the schedule. Like, comedy is here. And they know how important it is to me. So they're like, I'm like, this is not going to be always great for me and for you. But if you're okay with this, like, then I'll make sure. Like, I do other things, though. It's like I'm very, like, if I have a show or something, I'm not going to hang at the show. I'll leave and go, like, spend time with this person. So there's also things you can do to kind of make it more so they know you're prioritizing them still.
Communication.
Yeah, just be better about it. And most of us are not.
Yeah.
You know?
That's the whole thing.
Which is funny because our job is to talk.
Yeah. And also, that's some water. I put it in.
No, I'm good. I was just checking the time. Yeah.
I'll ask a few more things and I'll let you go because I know you're busy, man. Do you have a special?
5. Yeah.
Fuck out of your 5 specials?
Well, technically, so it's weird. Okay, so the first one was our album, Friends with 401k Benefits. That is with me, Tyler, and Meg, joint comedy album. Okay. We did it, I think, in 2018. I believe it came out in 2019. Yeah. And so that was audio, so that's why it's called an album. We also video recorded it, but we released the album. The album went number 1 on iTunes and top 10 on Billboard. So that was like our big credit starting out. So that was like 2019. So I was like, we were 2-3 years in a comedy at that point, right?
Yeah.
So that carried for a while, and then I think after that in 2019, I also the same year 2018 when we recorded Friends with 401k, I recorded a separate half hour of different material.
Completely different material
that I did on my own.
Yeah.
So I filled out this storefront space that they used to be called. It used to be called the storefront. It was great. Had like 40 people in there. Did an album. Was super fun. Did like all different. I call it like the B-sides because it was all like wild stuff I didn't do on the other one and kind of like new stuff. So that was very fun because it was like my crowd coming to see me for the first time versus like a joint. So I was like, oh, this is cool. This is also like a thing. I sat on that, and I released it during the pandemic for free, and like it did pretty well on Spotify because nothing had anything to do. Mm-hmm. So that was like, so there's 2 specials kind of right there, but both are like, they're specials, but they're, if you look at my individual part, they're like 30 minutes, right? They're not full me. And then I got 2 other ones. I got Dry Bar last year, so I got asked to do Dry Bar comedy, which is its own special, clean comedy. Did that in April of last year, released in August of last year. So that came out. That's helped a ton. Also, last year I did my own special. It's called this 50-50. So this is half material, half crowd work. I did that in September. Okay, so September I did that. So this is now, we're on 4. This is the 4th one, right? If you think about 2 albums, and then, Dry Bar is special. Now this thing is 2 technically as well. Haven't released the material from that one, sitting on that. Have the crowd work that's out now on YouTube for free. So that one's so Dry Bar is a paywall, right? You gotta have So, and then
I'm sweating. Go ahead.
1 week after that, after I did the September 50-50, I got into this festival in Vegas called Laughs After Dark, and they selected, out of the multiple people who applied, they selected 3 people to film half-hour specials. Mm-hmm. So 1 week after doing 50-50, I was like, oh shit, now I'm doing this. Like, I have to do 30 minutes again of material for this taping. Yeah. That's like potentially going to be on Amazon and other shit. So I was like, well, I can't release both because I'm going to overlap material. Obviously, this is a week apart. So that's why I've been kind of sitting on the other one. But I also don't know when this other one's going to come out. Okay. So that would be, technically 5. Okay. And so that would be technically 5. And then, and I don't even call this one a special, so we're going to say 5 because OnlyFans now TV did that. So that's,
your feet better be out in that special.
This year in July, I recorded a special for OnlyFans TV, and that's like a showcase though. It's like a don't tell comedy set. So it's like 10 minutes, few other Chicago comics. They're going to package it. That's going to come out this year. So basically I have that one and the Laughs After Dark one, which are TBD release dates. Yeah. And then I have the other one I'm sitting on, the material from 50-50. But then everything else is out right now. All those other things are out. All those other projects are out. So I'm not recording anything until potential. I'm gonna do an hour next year, probably middle or end of the year. I'm gonna sit for a while. Let's see how this OnlyFans thing does. Because now the name of the game is these like 10-minute sets are kind of what's popping. It keeps changing, but my plan is to keep growing my fan base with clips and stuff like that, and then eventually hit them with like a 45-hour of just like the best shit, and obviously new from 50-50. That's the goal. It's like do a new 45.
I have 2 more things.
Yeah, sure.
And then I'll let you go because I know you're busy, dude. But the first thing is you have fans now.
It's so weird, dude. It's wild.
Please. What is that?
It's weird. Like, it's so cool. I was just in St. Louis at the Funny Bone a couple weeks ago, headlining there. It's like my 3rd time I've headlined that club. Great club. I started like featuring there, then I've like moved up to headlining, and so obviously every time I go back, more people come. which is what you want. And this is what's cool. It's not just people who've seen me there before, which is great. They then tell people, they all come back again to see the new set. It's also people who are seeing me in other ways. So they've seen the dry bar, they've seen a clip, they've seen whatever. And that is what's cool. It's like the reach. So it's not only people telling their friends locally, it's also just random people. And then I had one guy come up to me and he was like, hey, dude, like, I've been following you. I'm from D.C. I happened to be in St. Louis for work this week, and I saw you were there because of your Instagram, and I had to come. But he's like, I've been a fan of you since 2020. I saw you off a clip or something. I'm like, wow. That is crazy. Like, just to think about that from, like, this guy's not even in that city. And I was like, well, I also am going to then I could tell him, like, hey, I'm going to D.C. And if, like, I had stuff to say, I could be like, it's just really cool. And it blows your mind. You're like, oh, shit, there's people who've been, like, kind of riding with me for years. Yeah. And I did a hometown show in Naperville. That's where I'm from originally. And I haven't really done much comedy. There's not really a dedicated club out there. So there's a little theater that we use for this. And I was like, oh, let's do like a 50-person show, whatever. I'll be able to 10 people from my family will come. That's 1/5 the tickets, right? So we sold it out like 2 weeks before
How
the
many
show.
Seats?
That was 50.
Okay.
50 seats. So we sold it out. And then I was like, oh, that's 2 weeks. So I started getting a little cocky. I was like, well, do you want to add a second show? I was like, no. I'm trying to like hang out with my family after. I don't want to do 2 shows. Let's upgrade the size of the theater. It was like the Lodge where they have multiple venues within the space. So they're like, well, the next option is 150 seat. And I was like, all right, well, even if we get 100 in there, it's still better. Let's shoot for 100, pay out, and everything works good. So we did that, and then so we had to basically sell. Actually, it was like this is a week out before the show, not 2 weeks. So within a week, we moved 100 tickets additional. So we sold out that. So I was like, oh shit, this is cool now, because hella Indian people came from Naperville, and it was like, oh, these are fans. Like, this is not, I didn't realize, I'm like, oh, the Burb crowd, they're not coming to the city like that. So when they see you out there, they're like, oh, we're going to come. We're from Batavia. I do the Vault, right? So all these different kind of things, and you're like, and it was great, because I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is a theater, like, legit. So that was super cool to see and feel. And then I was like, oh, now I understand. I got to sell merch. I got to take the photos. Like, I'm starting to realize all that shit works, right? I stay after. I talk to everybody. I shake all the hands, giving out my fucking business card to everybody. Like, I'm doing everything. And I've been doing that for years, but, like, it pays off, you know? It's like some of the stuff you don't like to do, but you got to learn how to enjoy it. And also, it makes a difference to people. Like, they're like, oh, he talked to me, and he shared an anecdote or whatever, and it's, like, cool to hear about it. And you don't want to be ever ungrateful for that. It's so cool that people coming year over year to see you. Like, I don't know anybody I do that for reciprocally. You know? I don't see shit. I don't support anybody. I'm the worst. I don't do shit. So I'm like blown away that people do it, you know? And it's like, it's so funny that I'm like, even people I like, I'm like, yeah, I'll catch the next one. Like, I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. So I think it's amazing. You gotta pinch yourself kind of all the time and be like, this is what it is, you know? And it's just like, I just had a clip went viral. It gave me like a bunch more followers, and now I'm getting like messages like, when do you come to this city? Like, it's just really cool to be in that position. And I'm still have so much like way to go, but it's cool to start to kind of build that, and nice to be able to kind of plan how to do that, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, before I ask my last question, I just want to say to you, you impress and exhaust me at the same time. Meeting you and seeing, like, you always inspire me to like push. Like, every time I talk to you, I'm like, oh fuck, I'm being lazy. I'm in basketball shorts. And this man's got nice sneakers on. No, dude, you always impress me, and I'm glad you're on the podcast. And
thanks, man.
You put this work in that God damn it, I don't see it from many people, and so I think every bit of success you have, you've earned it. 100%.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and that's what's cool about it too. It's like with comedy, like the other things, you know, you can kind of get things through like nepotism or through, you know, the right person. In comedy, you can't really, like I said, the scene checks you. You can't really. Funny is funny. Like, you can't. There's no way to make it appear you're funnier than you are. You know, like the live audience is gonna tell you you're not. Yeah. There's no editing that can happen live. Like, that's why, like, other people are like, oh, I'm a sketch person or whatever. I can have all these effects happen. I can cut quickly. I'm a YouTube personality. I can end the video here. I can add a laugh track. You can't do shit in a comedy club. Like, you can't. So you have to have this. You have to get better, and you have to that's what's scary about this. It takes so long to get good, but that's what's also really cool about it is like you can't take that from me. Like you can't take any of that, and that's why no one's like ever like, oh, man, you don't deserve that. Everyone's like, oh shit, like I see you doing it. Like I don't know what to say. Like you're just doing it. So that's what I love about it. It's just like 1-to-1 in that sense. Yeah. And there's nothing else like that in my like life. I feel like
Yeah, comedy is a special place.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for the last question?
Let's do it.
It's
Hit
been
me.
My favorite thing so far. So we're gonna pretend that the camera's you in 5 years.
Okay.
What do you want to say to yourself 5 years from now?
Oh man. Cocaine is a hell of a drug. No, I'm not like I said. 5 years. So me in 5. It's me in 5 years.
It's you in 5 years. 5 years from now, when you look back on this.
Okay. Keep taking time off. Take more time off than you think. Spend more time with people that you love, because there is momentum in comedy. There is this feeling of like, oh, I got to be everywhere at once. But there's other people in your life that are also getting older, also changing, also aging, and you can't have that time back with them. So focus on those things, and also double check everything like you do. Sometimes you have a reaction, like you want to respond to something immediately, but like reread it out loud, maybe. Maybe like, maybe this sounds a little crazy that I'm about to say this. So continue to operate at a level of, respect what you have, respect what you've built, but also respect everybody. Be nice to everybody. You never know who's watching a show. You never know where someone's going to be in 5 years, where you are right now. If you're in a worse position, then quit at this point. Hopefully you're not. But, in 5 years from now, I hope you look at this and you're like, oh, that was really cool. I hope more people saw this and learned something from it. And I hope I can go back and learn something too.
All right, let's take this picture.